In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening, viewers. Tonight I'd like to share with you some thoughts about finding your joy. I spent my childhood watching my mother, Lucy Lillian, become an expert in joy despite everything. She had endured hair-raising trials raising children throughout the 60s and 70s. I watched my mother grieve the murder of her only sibling, a sister, and her sister's husband. Then my father announced that he had never really loved her and moved out after over 40 years of marriage. Then she lost a breast to cancer, followed a few years later by losing her vocal cords to throat cancer. It was right on the heels of all of that one winter in my living room, the two of us were sitting alone on the couch, not much going on, just kind of talking. And she spoke these honest words from the bottom of her heart. She says, I think I'm about as happy as I've ever been. I learned two things in that moment, two things incredibly empowering for myself and for you today. I learned that happiness is a decision. It's a chosen state of mind. The other thing that hit me is to what extent a very deep relationship with God can sustain you and I. While I was initially outraged at Satan for taking this voice of my mother that had been so used so often to save numerous souls, she did what she'd always done. She continued to change the lives of those around her within her sphere of influence, even better because they would hear from her struggling to speak. And as she was struggling to speak, and they were much more soft hearted about it, attentive and listening even better to what she was working so hard to say for their good. So no matter how your brain is wired, what we will talk about tonight works, and it works because God says it works, and it works no matter the unique wiring of your brain or the burdens that you bear. My goal tonight is to love you by sharing with you what I've learned from what God says we can do to experience the fruit of the Spirit called joy. A state the Lord Almighty in his inspired scriptures is also sometimes called happiness or being blessed. What I share is also gathered from more than 58 years now, 63 years of enduring a lot of hard things myself, the death of children, and much, much more. Observing and assisting other people in crisis, and admittedly reading all the best information I can get my hands on about positive psychology and the brain science related to happiness. So since the goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith, 1 Timothy 5:1-5, today I want to love you by saying some practical things that even if they pierce your heart a little or a lot, can prepare you for a happy eternity and, if lived out on a daily basis, can help you be happier in life. God wants you to love life and see good days, 1 Peter 3:10-12. And joy is a fruit of the Spirit. In other words, joy is the result of the Spirit's work in your life. So the purpose of this program is to learn how to better cooperate with the Spirit, to let him do the work in your heart, mind, soul, and spirit that he will only do if we willingly participate. Before we begin, I must make a point here, a point of clarification. So clearly, there is a time to weep. Ecclesiastes 3:4. So in your darkest day, grieve with all your might. Ecclesiastes 9:10. Jesus himself, our example of perfection, was said to be a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. There is a time to weep. Weep for our culture, weep for what breaks God's heart, and let that grief be a springboard to motivate you to make a difference for good in the world, in the cause that breaks your heart the most. Jesus said, quote, "Blessed are those who weep, for they shall be comforted," unquote. We are not designed to reach our full potential if we live in a constant state of grief. But acknowledging pain and allowing ourselves to feel it deeply is actually one key to happiness, a point we will further explore in this program. So, how to experience more joy? Part 1. To experience more joy, stop drinking out of muddy cisterns. To light up your brain. How sad is this scripture? Quote, "Be appalled, O heavens, at this, and shudder, be very desolate, declares the Lord. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, to hew for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water." Jeremiah 2:13. The ancient cistern was a stone holding tank for water. When a cistern was broken, it could only hold a small amount of dirty water. So here's my point. Your brain is created to crave serotonin, endorphins, dopamine. God's plan is that you opt out of instant gratification in self-destructive ways and to willingly choose to let Him give you the clear, clean refreshment that will leave your soul less thirsty. Isaiah 44:3, John 7:37 through 38, John 4:13 through 15, and Revelation 21:6. Here's one way to figure out how you're doing here. Is your capacity to stomach dirtier and dirtier images, language, websites, music, movies, television, and books increasing? Or are you getting more and more sensitive and brokenhearted over this ever-growing darkness? Sin is crouching, my sisters. Everything is at stake. And God says you get one life, Hebrews 9:27. To help this idea stick of the brevity of life in comparison to eternity, I like to use this analogy. Maybe you will also find it useful to you when you're teaching others. For years, we'd go up camping with dozens of friends at Honeyman State Park in Florence, Oregon. One of our activities was to go quadding on a stretch of huge sand dunes that cover about 40,000 acres. How many grains of sand do you suppose there are? Imagine you are there on the dunes. Reach down now and find one isolated grain of sand and imagine it, you can see it on the tip of your finger. Balance it there and focus your eyes on it. I'd like to suggest to you that this single grain of sand represents how long you will exist here in this world. Let's say one grain of sand represents 100 years. Now imagine looking up and down the beach. How many grains of sand do you suppose exist there on this beach in terms of years? Include all the grains underneath the grains that you can see visibly. Now include the grains under the ocean floor and include those from all over the beaches, all over the earth, and the miles and miles of sand dunes in every desert. Times it by a number beyond the biggest number any human has ever been able to comprehend, and you'll still not be any closer to how long you will exist in this afterlife. In light of this reality, prepare to meet thy God, Amos 4:12, is the best advice ever given. And here comes my bigger point. Do you know what God asks of you and I? He asks us to sacrifice cheap, sinful dopamine hits for that long, short of time to keep our hearts pure enough so that we can live life that honors His holiness and be prepared to spend eternity with Him in heaven throughout the rest of time. So Matthew 5:8 there. You must have a pure heart to see God, the true giver of joy. Let's stop drinking out of dirty, muddy cisterns, and we will have more joy throughout eternity and in this life as well. Secondly, to experience more joy, savor God by listening and talking to Him at least 1 hour each day. An hour every day may seem at first like a lot of time, but we are told to, quote, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life, unquote. Proverbs 4:23. With the world coming into our eyes and ears all day long from every direction, how can we expect to be happy if we don't take the time to be still and know that God is God, unquote. Psalms 46:10. Find life by finding time every day to draw near to God, and the things of this temporary world will no longer consume your thoughts. Proverbs 8:34 through 35 says, quote, blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at my doorposts, for he who finds me finds life. Growing wisdom takes a lot of time and focus, but taking the time to become intimate with God will make you feel more alive than anything else. People chase wealth and honor and pleasure and peace and happiness, but note the one place Proverbs 13 through 18 says every one of those things are found. Quote, how blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. For her profit is better than the profit of silver, and her gain better than fine gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who hold her fast. Proverbs 3:13 through 18. How nutritious is your mental diet? Do you consume quality spiritual calories? Marcus Aurelius noted, quote, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, unquote. Fresh approaches to Bible study will be for your spirit quality spiritual calories. Here are a few tips. 1, for those watching this program who are not 100% sure that there really is a God or that the Bible is God's communication for mankind, I'd like to recommend to you a new study Bible put out by Apologetics Press called Defending the Faith Study Bible. It's available on their website. It includes a litany of positive scientific evidences for God's existence, documented archaeological discoveries, comparisons of modern scientific discoveries with the biblical text, and historical evidence that validates the predictive prophecies of the Bible. If you have never read the scriptures in your life, I recommend starting in 2 Peter because it addresses many topics that will give you the motivation to keep reading. Then begin reading the New Testament at the beginning. It takes about 20 minutes a day to slowly and thoughtfully read the Bible through in 1 year, or maybe 10 minutes more quickly. Find a plan that has dates on it to keep yourself on track. Jot your questions down as you read the first time through, looking up cross-references, definitions, and then you can further research those notes as time goes on. 2, for more seasoned Bible readers, I'll offer this. One of the most transformative habits I've discovered is to read the scriptures until I've come to something that convicts me or concerns me or fills my heart with gratitude and praise. At that point, I pause, pray briefly from the heart, then continue to read again. I'll still pray again after my Bible study, but this read, pause, pray has made my time communing with God more intimate and conversational than it has ever been. 3, another option is an audio Bible. The Bible experience is my favorite because it puts the emotion back into the text and includes background sounds that make it sound more like the present. After I listened to it for a few times, I opted to enhance my comprehension by purchasing the matching translation to read along. An audio Bible also comes in handy if you need to catch up on your daily Bible reading program, or if you'd prefer to listen to the genealogies pronounced or other more difficult sections of the Old Testament, like the tabernacle construction and that kind of thing. So now that we've talked about listening to God, I'd like to offer some fresh ideas that could help you grow in your prayer life, talking to God. You could purchase the prettiest journal you can find to write down your 5 favorite blessings every day. A side benefit to this is that it trains your mind to look for the good in every day as you choose today's favorite 5 blessings, even during days when blessings seem hidden by trial. Just as important, pour out your praises, confess to God where you most need His cleansing grace, and thoughtfully pray through your written prayer requests. These are my suggestions to help bring freshness to your hour a day, communing with God, one of the most important sources of joy. My third idea for finding your joy is to cold turkey complaining. Don't get blessing amnesia after God has answered your prayers 1,000 times. Why did God destroy Israel according to 1 Corinthians 10:10? Grumbling. If you want to be counterculture, replace the fighting with your brethren or spouse or children with the gentle and quiet spirit God treasures in women. Trade outbursts of anger for sacrificial peaceability. Replace your complaining with gratitude. Here's a challenge. Go 3 days without complaining and start over again every time you forget. You can actually download a fasting app on your phone to track yourself as you do this fast from complaining. If you make it 3 days, go for 7. If you make it 7, go for 12. Complaining is disgusting to God. But why? God is grossed out when we complain because we are so buried in blessings. The Israelites outraged God by complaining while they were crossing a desert with none of the comforts we now enjoy. Think about this. Of every time and place a human could have been born during the existence of this planet, God chose to let you be born during an unprecedented prosperity and freedom. Living in such a time and place as this, the Lord has showered more comforts of this life upon this generation in this country than any other people at any other time. The relative ease with which we can provide a living for our families, what a blessing. We wives and mothers are free from spending every waking moment feeding, clothing, and sheltering our families so that we now have time to better tend to their souls and the souls of those around us. Yes, truly, if the blessings of each individual who ever lived could physically be stacked in piles, your pile of blessings would approach the top of Mount Everest in comparison to those born in other places or at other times in world history, especially when we recall the blessings of modern medicine and technology. The blessings we enjoy are quite often also the direct result of good people who lived out biblical virtues. Our freedom to even become a country was secured and is still secured today by selfless acts of valor. And most discoveries in medicine and technology are the direct result of good men reflecting God's qualities of ingenuity and God's principles of diligence, patience, and endurance. We are far too blessed to be ungrateful. That's why to experience more joy, we must cold turkey complaining and ingratitude and zoom in on all our blessings. My fourth idea for experiencing more joy is to consciously choose a positive perspective. Leo Tolstoy said, quote, "Happiness does not depend on outward things, but on the way we see them." The biggest key to having a positive perspective is found in 2 Corinthians 10:5, when Paul says, quote, "Take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ," unquote. Visualize the dark, destructive, hopeless thoughts that enter your mind as a tennis ball. When life whacks a worried, rageful, lustful, or depressing thought into your court or mind, don't grab it and hold it and breathe it in and carry it around. Instead, whack it out of your court instantly and replace it only with the beautiful things prescribed by the maker of your mind. Things that are true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, and praiseworthy. Philippians 4:8. Mindfully selecting the thoughts upon which you will allow yourself to dwell is the key to changing your mind, which is the key to changing your mental health, which is the key to changing your life, which is the key to changing your physical and eternal future. Over time, healthy, reality-based thinking will become more natural, and truth will set you free. John 8:32. In all kinds of ways. All kinds of good and perfect ways, that is. If it is hard for me to find a positive perspective, I might want to ask myself, am I perhaps too high maintenance? We cannot be joyful until we stop demanding that everyone and everything be a certain way. Flexibility is a great source of contentment and joy. See how few preferences you can get by with so that you don't box yourself into the miserable mental corner that one author describes when he says, quote, "You look for the things that remind you of painful experiences in the past or remind you of your pet peeves. Then you see it, collect it, and by doing so, now you cannot happily experience reality because you have said there is a way I need it to be for it to be okay. There is a way it better not be, or I won't be okay." Not only have you made up a way that everything and everyone must be so that it feels good to you and it doesn't feel bad, now you have just pitted yourself against God, unquote. Ask God to help you see your blessings clearly, not your pet peeves. We need to explore one vital area where we must check that our perspective is positive, and that is how we view worship. God only wants worshipers who are joyous and have King David's attitude of, I was glad, quote, "I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord," Psalms 122:1. How blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Psalm 84:4. Given the darkness of our sin, what an amazing thing that God even accepts our worship. When you come to worship, do so with a perspective of being there to give, not simply to consume encouragement. By Sunday, if you have fed on God's green pastures all week long, you should be filled up to overflowing and ready to pour out his love onto the souls that need it most around you. Lift your eyes after the closing prayer and find the soul who needs your love the most. Whether the help you give to that needy soul is physical or emotional support, you'll be more joyous if you are a giver and not always a taker. Quote, "Happy is he who is gracious to the poor," unquote, Proverbs 14:21. Henry Ward Beecher says, quote, "Live to shed joys on others. Thus shall your own happiness be secured," unquote. The Lord promises deliverance in our daily trouble when we take note of the helpless. Psalms 41:1. In the first commandment, if the first commandment was to love God with all your hearts, and the second was to love our neighbor as ourselves, it's pretty clear that we are here on earth to love and be loved. So to both introverts and extroverts, I say this: stay social. When you are feeling a little sad, look at your friends list and find somebody else to bring happiness to. When you're feeling happy, tell others your good news. Shared joys are doubled. Make hospitality a habit. God will help you shift your perspective when you take the time to be around good people. My fifth idea to experience more joy is to set your affection on things above. With regard to the divine accolade, well done, good and faithful servant, C.S. Lewis says, quote, "No one can enter heaven except as a child, and nothing is so obvious in a child as its great and undisguised pleasure in being praised, and that is enough to raise our thoughts to what may happen when the redeemed soul, beyond all hope and nearly beyond belief, learns that she has pleased him whom she was created to please. To please God, to be a real ingredient in the divine happiness, to be loved by God, not merely pitied, but delighted in, is an artist, as an artist delights in his work, or a father in his son, it seems impossible, a weight of burden of glory which our thoughts can hardly sustain. But so it is, unquote, C.S. Lewis. Let that joy rise to the surface. That reality of seeing God smile face to face, what more could you ask for? Sadly, this life can be as good as existence ever gets for some souls. I pray for you that this life is as difficult as your existence ever gets, and that heaven is your destination. Because when you've got heaven in your future, you've got everything to look forward to. Matthew 7:13 says, quote, "Enter into the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it," unquote. So live like somebody left the gate open, because somebody did. The narrow gate that leads to life is open. Luke 15:20 says, "So he got up and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him, and ran and embraced him and kissed him." Your heavenly Father waits there with open arms. Matthew 7:13 and Luke 15, verse 20. Thank you so much for staying with me through this program. It's actually a re-record of a program that went missing on YouTube, and so it may have sounded familiar for those of you that have been around for 5 years. But you will find parts 2 and parts 3 in the archives of our same. I think we've got some 250 videos there, so it'll be kind of toward the beginning, and it's also entitled "Finding Your Joy." But it was done by a 5-year younger Cindy, so probably looking a little older here. So I hope this program has been a blessing to you, and with that I will say good night.